All right. So I'm going to post one more time for posterity because now that is saved in the record there. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about making room for science in the elementary classroom specifically, but there's also applications across all the grade levels. I am Donald White. I am the science content specialist for Coweta County School System. And this is Dr. Amanda White. Oh, and I didn't update your position there. You should tell them a little bit about what you're doing.
Golly, I'm the media specialist at Peachtree City Elementary School. So in Fayette County, Georgia, I have been in that position for about 18 years. Prior to that, I was a high school English teacher also in Fayette County for 2 years. I worked as a writing consultant at the University of West Georgia. And last Monday, I began a new interim position for the remainder of the year. I am the acting assistant principal at my school for the remainder of the year. I was asked to step up as our AP has taken a different position effective immediately, and I'll be sitting in the front office for the remainder of the year. So it's just what a time to be alive in 2021.
So it's been a big week here at the White House. So lots going on, but we can't wait to share a little bit of the work that we've been doing with this. There I am.
There's Donald White.
Follow me on Twitter at DWhiteSciGuy for more stuff about the stuff that we're talking about. But want to start with this slide and talk a little bit about how this article, I think Amanda, I think you actually shared it with me from the Atlantic, and there's a link down there below talking about how that our students hadn't gotten better at reading in 20 years.
This grieves me. This article really saddens me.
And as someone, for Amanda, someone who wants people to read, the notion that the reading skills, we're not getting any better at it is a real problem.
I spent 20 years pushing books at kids.
You did. There's also a link down there to an article about SAT scores dropping, and that they have been continually dropping over the years, actually since we started doing standardized testing. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of data to see, but because we only have about 30 minutes to talk today, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that data, but the data is really, really striking. And as you are making decisions at your school, you need leverage for those decisions. Data is always going to come up. You need to be able to show your admins why the data supports your position.
I have sat in the front office chair for 1 week now, 5 days, and in between contact tracing and discipline and contact tracing, I have also done a lot of color coding of data and highlighting and sorting and compiling of data. We love some data in the front office. We didn't want to spend loads of time. In previous presentations, Donna and I have done a little more of a deeper dive into the data supporting STEM and literacy, but we really needed to hit the ground running in this one because the sessions are shorter. But we wanted you to have it because in having those, really tough conversations with your admins and saying, I really want to link these two subjects up. I want to combine some things. I want to do some innovative things. Admins I have come to see are generally going to ask, but why? Where's the research to support it? Where's the data to support that? So you have it here in links below. We didn't want you to leave empty-handed in terms of research and data, but we did want you to leave with hands full of hands-on applications of how you could put STEM and literacy together, making some time for science.
So why aren't our kids reading and reading well? And the research that is indicated in that Atlantic article, and you'll find similar research all the way through, is that the issue with our kids and reading has less to do with reading skills and more to do with the lack of life experience. You think about the schools in your district, maybe it's your own school, where the kids struggle. And the reason that they struggle is because they haven't learned anything. In my district, I have a school that's in a very small community, and they have 4 generations of families living in the same household, and no one in that household has been outside their own city. Not that they haven't been outside the county or the state or anything like that. They haven't been outside their own city.
We live in Coweta County, y'all. We are not, an outpost somewhere.
No. We are suburban, by and large, but this area, this one school in particular, is very, very rural. And, we're trying to break the cycles of poverty and those kind of things. And one of the data says that one of the things that does that is when you're getting those kids some life experience, they can see that other people live differently than they do. One
little small example that we usually throw out, I read stories, and I work in Fayette County. I work in Peachtree City. If you're aware of, the demographics of Fayette County and of Peachtree City in general, that is an affluent area. My kids do come to the table with a lot of life experience, not across the board though. And we sat down and read some Johnny Appleseed books one year, and we talked about, this thing that I'm holding up, let's use some adjectives to describe it. This is an apple. It is red and it's crunchy and it's juicy. And a little kid raised his hand and said, well, but yes, that's not an apple though. And I'm a firm believer in change my mind. Give me some details. Why do you think this thing is not an apple? Well, because that's not what an apple looks like. An apple is sliced, and it comes in a little plastic baggie. And it comes in a plastic bag, and it tastes kind of like lemon when you bite into it. Oh, I get you. You've never eaten a whole apple. You've only eaten those pre-sliced ones that come in the cafeteria, or that you pick up at the grocery store that mom throws in your lunchbox. I get it. And we've taken our kid apple picking every year. I grew up picking crab apples off the trees and feeding them to the cows over the fence. I know what an apple looks like and exactly what will happen if you eat too many of those crab apples when you're a little kid. But my kid had never seen that. He didn't have anything to hang red, juicy, round thing on. And it's just important to realize that even in an affluent county like mine, sometimes we give them passages to read and we overestimate what their life experience is. We think, well, of course, everybody knows what an apple is, but they may not.
Especially now, especially considering COVID, the things
how much we're missing out
on right now. And you think about the context that we give for the kids. They don't have any context for the stuff that we're asking them to read. Like with all of the pressures that are on education right now, we're squeezing things like social studies and science out in the name of more reading and math. If you look at the governor's latest statement about addressing the teacher shortage, the teacher pipeline, one of the things that he specifically mentions in there is that he wants all teachers to have training in reading instruction, which sounds fantastic. But then as administrators, we both know that the things that get assessed are the things that get taught in the classroom. And if we're not doing a good job assessing the context for all the things that we want them to do, the students aren't going to be successful. The example I give you there is that, if you don't know who won the Civil War, how can you understand a passage about the Reconstruction? And that Reconstruction, I think that was one of the, was it ITBS? It was on one of the major national exams. There was a passage about Reconstruction, and a lot of our kids could not answer that because they hadn't had instruction on the Civil War, because we were spending so much time focusing on reading comprehension skills. And when we do that, we handicap our students. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I got an example here.
Get ready.
Okay, sorry for all the words, but we're going to do a little reading comprehension quiz here. We're actually not going to do the reading comprehension quiz. So this is a passage from a newspaper in England. Take a second and kind of read through some of this, and then see if you can answer some of the questions down at the bottom. Wait time. Wait time.
Totally appropriate. We gave this passage to our 15-year-old daughter to read this morning, and she was like, what even is this? I don't even know what this is.
Well, so reading this, you can probably answer the question, what did Joe Root hit against Sri Lanka last month?
Because you have been given specific training on how to locate the answer within the text. You know how to look for keywords. You know how to go back and dig those answers out. What did Joe Root hit against Sri Lanka last month?
So you can go through those types of questions. You can answer questions 1, 2, and 3, no problem. You might miss question number 4, but that's the critical thinking question. So you still have achieved quote unquote mastery
of this text,
but you have no idea that this is actually a cricket article about the sport cricket. And I don't know anything about cricket. I do know that the matches take days. And that like if you look in there, there's a line, having lost Roy Burns for 33 and Dan Lawrence for a duck. I don't know what.
On the stroke of lunch.
A duck on the stroke of lunch. They actually, the games are so long, they have to take breaks for food, which, I'm all for games, sports that you play where we get to eat in the middle of them. But knowing how to read this and pick out the answers to these questions doesn't mean that you understand anything about what you're talking about.
Cricket.
And Amanda posted in the chat there about the Speech Jammer app. That's exactly how I felt about this. Like trying to parse it down to get 3 questions out of it. This was hard.
I just felt like there were other words playing in my ear. I don't know what's happening.
I don't know what's happening either. So there is a model for literacy in science, and want to kind of walk you through some of this, get you the feeling for science. And the first number one thing for science, and you should start out with your science lessons and do this every time, is the students should experience a phenomenon. So, these days it's hard to get the kids to experience a phenomenon. You may not be able to put them together in your traditional lab settings and those kind of things, but it's that experience that you remember. You probably, I don't know about your science background, but I can guess that some of the memories of science background, your science background, are going to be things that smelled bad, things that made a lot of smoke,
things that exploded,
those kind of things that gross you out.
Donald's former students routinely comment to him on Facebook about the time he tried to light up the pickle in his lab class and ended up blowing out all the circuits in the classroom and blowing up the burned pickle.
We have
we're
to. Recording this.
We have to. 20 years later, that is what those high school students remember about your class. It's important.
That is true. That is true.
Fun times.
But we definitely want the kids to experience a phenomenon. I'm going to show you an example here in just a second about how they can experience phenomenon distance learning wise. Then we want the kids to talk the science in the classroom. We want them to have classroom discourse. We want them to work together as scientists do in a way to discuss the kinds of things that they're learning about so that they can see the different perspectives that each student brings to a particular phenomenon. We want them to raise questions. We want them to do all of those kind of things that are built into our science standards that are the practices of science and engineering. And one of the things that we miss out so many times is that ability to talk through what we were doing. I know as a high school science teacher, I did my lab and we did it, cleaned up, the kids wrote up their lab report, and that was all we ever did with the lab. We never went back and talked about how the lab connected to what they were learning about. And, hearing Amanda talk about her English classroom, that what they did, you guys talked.
It was all about the talk. And even as a media specialist now, I felt for the longest time, well, if you come into my library, what are we doing? I mean, we're reading and talking about stories. We just talk about stories. But there's something really important and powerful to that. That's a huge piece of learning for students, giving them the time and the space to talk and to discuss their ideas. And now sitting in the admin chair, knowing that my principal is going into classrooms and looking for small group discussions, for teacher-led discussions, for differentiated group patterning and what are you doing there and fostering discussion there. This is an excellent time to build that sense of classroom discourse and to really show off to your admins, look at the innovative teaching I'm doing with the different groups and the way we're all interacting together to discuss our ideas.
And classroom discourse is also a way too to reach at some of the equity things that we're trying to do across education. That when you talk to our Fortune 500 companies around the world, they talk about wanting to come up with innovative ideas and strategies to solve some of the world's problems. And the way that they do that is they go out and seek talent, diverse talent. That when you bring people in who all think the same way, who are all have the same background, that feels very comfortable, but it's not the most effective means to solve a problem. That when you allow students to see that bringing diverse people to work on the same problem allows them different perspectives, which allows them to get more creative and come up with more creative solutions. So that's an important equity issue. And you look at some of the things that we're struggling with now as a community, as a country, a global problem. A lot of those have to do with the fact that we're not able to see things from other people's perspectives.
Growth happens outside the comfort zone.
Growth does happen outside the comfort zone. So the next part is in science would be read it. We want the kids to read some science here.
Yes.
And then we want them to write it. I was having a conversation with our daughter who we're so proud of her. She's on her way to the International Science and Engineering Fair with her project on artificial oyster reefs. She loves
shameless plug for
our kiddo. But one of the strengths that she has is her ability to communicate the science in a way that people come walking away saying, wow, she was really passionate about it, but she's also very knowledgeable about it. So
and it was accessible.
It was accessible to them. And so when my kids were doing their lab reports, they were writing things, but they weren't doing the kind of writing where they're synthesizing. They might do some data analysis maybe, but they weren't arguing from the evidence. And so this is one of the things that we want to kind of show you. So what I want to show you next is I want to show you a little example lesson.
This is fun.
Oh, wait.
Standards. There's more.
I'll just skip over it. Yeah. So all of this that we're talking about with the science, this is in the standards.
And there's great overlap between your ELA and science standards. They fit perfectly together as if they were made for each other.
It was intentional. Like I helped to write some of the GSE science standards, and it was intentional. We intentionally looked at the ELA standards, the math standards, to try to make connections and use some of the common language there.
You wanted to hitch your wagon to us, right?
I definitely wanted to hitch our wagon to you, because we know that is things that are overemphasized. And so if we're going to emphasize those things, let's make sure that we're using the same language, so we can, shoehorn our way back into your classroom time.
And y'all, we're both educators. We're both, not in the traditional classroom anymore, but we know exactly what sits on your plate. We know how full your plate is. And in doing presentations like this, for the need to combine ELA and science and show how those two can fit together, it has never, ever been our intention to give you more to do, but to instead show you how much more efficient and how much more productive and innovative and creative you can be when you compress those two together. And the standards show it so beautifully that they're just made to be worked in together.
Yes.
It's totally doable. Less for you to do.
Well,
working smarter, not harder. We are big believers in
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. You think about, in my district, most of the schools have 2 hours of literacy instruction per day. Now, it may not all be 1 2-hour block and maybe broken up into different things, but it's 2 hours of literacy instruction. And then they get half an hour of science or social studies instruction every day. And they go back and forth. A lot of schools flip-flop. You do 2 weeks of social studies, 2 weeks of science, or something along those lines. And looking at the ELA standards and looking at the things that the ELA standards are asking your students to do versus that same language in the science standards, if you're teaching the science standards correctly, you're teaching them the ELA standards at the same time. So now, instead of 2 hours for literacy and half an hour for science, now you've got 2.5 hours for literacy and science together.
A big, powerful block of time. And
that's one of the things that teachers tell me all the time about trying to teach science the way that we're asking them to teach it, is that they don't have time to do it. And that, like when Amanda was in the English classroom, the discussions that went on in the classroom take time. The discussions that we want you to have with your science students takes time. So this is a way to find that time, because now you're doing both, right? And I'm going to show you now, I think, the example.
Okay, now we'll do it.
There we go. Okay, so this is an example. Again, these are links to the different things, different pieces of the lesson here. So we're going to engage in a phenomenon. We're going to engage in an argument argumentative session here. We're not actually gonna do all of this because we don't have time, but trying to get you to see the process, to think about that the framework for literacy and science that I just shared with you. I show you how all of this matches up. So one of the things that we would do is we would show you a phenomenon. And I actually, I totally stole this from Christy Fogel at Arbor Springs Elementary School here in Coweta County. She did this with her students. And she showed, they were working on earth science, constructive and destructive forces, those kind of things. And what she showed them was this video right here. All right. Let's show you this.
Here we go.
Exhaustive 20.
I went too far.
Always.
About 5 hours later, Hattie on site.
And not a moment too soon.
Not a moment too soon.
Okay, so what she
Terrifying.
did when she showed that video, I have to share this little one. When she showed that video, the little boy who was sitting next to me, he said, "Oh, expletive." Oh crap! Except he didn't say crap. So they were totally engaged. And what she had them do, notice that I didn't share any of the explanation to the video or anything like that. She had them wrestle with what they observed. They had to collect evidence. And the little dashed box there, they had to draw what they saw. They had to label it. And then in the big square, they had to ask questions about, what they thought was happening, what information they needed in order to explain what was happening. And then they did a classroom, not debate, but they shared out what they saw. And it was interesting to hear them talk about the different things that they saw in the video, things that I had missed in the video that they saw as evidence. And they shared that out, trying to come up with an explanation there. There's another video there of the same phenomenon, but from a different perspective. It's two guys riding in the back of a truck as the hill is sliding down after them. So it was, the whole idea there then is that they're getting the same experience, but from a different perspective, talking about the same phenomenon, and then they get to go through the process. So what we've just done is shared the phenomenon. You experienced the phenomenon. Now we would talk you through it. You would talk through the phenomenon. And all this time, the science teacher is not explaining anything. We're just working our way through it all to see if we can come up with a kind of a consensus about what we're doing, what happened in that phenomenon. Then the next thing that we would do is we would read some information about the phenomenon itself. So I'll show you. This is from ReadWorks. All right, there's dangerous landslide, and y'all may be familiar with ReadWorks. You go through and you would read through. This is where you get things like definitions and those kind of things from the text. Okay. Again, I'm not explaining any of this to them. They're exploring this and uncovering the knowledge themselves. And that is super important to keep the engagement happening.
If you need help finding passages like that, I can't give you enough plugs for your school librarian. They know what type of district subscriptions you own. They know what types of subscriptions come available with whatever library circulation program you're using. So reach out to your school media specialist and see how they can help you pull together some literacy resources that will help you support this kind of reading and writing in your classroom.
All right, so I want to walk you through some specific reading instruction here that you can do. And this is all comes from Jody Wheeler-Toppin, Once Upon a Physical Science book. She's got a whole series, Once Upon a Physical Science, Once Upon a Life Science, Once Upon an Earth Science. But this is something, when I read this is something that I've seen Amanda do with her own students. So take them through the Think Aloud, Amanda.
So when I do some reading training most years with parents in my building, literacy volunteers who come in who want to read with children. And a lot of times parents who are reading with their children at home, if they don't have any type of training in reading or teaching or anything. They take a picture book and they straight up read it from the beginning to end. They read the words, and that's great. But I try to train parents to read before and during and after. We use our words before and during and after when you're reading a story. It's fine for you to stop in the middle and question and explain a word and what do you think's going on. And when I read a story to children, it generally takes me 20 or more minutes to get through a picture book because we're constantly stopping and starting, whether kids ask questions or whether I pose the questions myself. But to dig deeper into that text and get them to think more about what's going on, drawing in the illustrations and helping them to really analyze what's going on. So the passage that you have on your screen right there, in italics, you've got the text that the teacher or the classroom would actually be reading. And then in parentheses, there are examples of the additional dialogue that the teacher is giving to support that reading and to help your students really feel safe about exploring what they're reading, to try to draw more conversation out of them. Reading a passage isn't just reading the words on the page. It's actually digging deeper and discussing with the kids and stopping to analyze words they don't know, to help them discuss tough ideas and help them gain a little bit more meaning from a passage.
I also think it's very important too for the kids to see a strong reader struggle with a passage.
Yes.
Because they think that we teach them that, well, you're good at reading, so you should just be able to read right through this. And that's not the way that works. Like us as adults, reading some of the things that we have to read, we have to stop and process. Now, what did I just read there? Maybe I have to go look some things up, those kind of things. I remember giving our daughter a book and sitting down with it. It was called Your Inner Fish. It's about evolution. And I watched her read the book. She had no business reading the book. She was like a fifth grader, I think, at that point. But she had her Chromebook out, and she was looking up words that she was running across in the text because she didn't know them. That's a great example of how you deal with a new passage with information that you don't have. But kids don't realize that they can do that unless you show them that that's an option. All right, and we're running out of time here. So one way to keep the conversation going and do some direct reading instruction is to have some peer reading groups. And the way that this works is you split the kids up into groups of 3. Each of them has a role. You give them a text to go through, and you show them some ways to code the comprehension, code the text as they're working through it. So like that dangerous landslide article that I showed you, you might give that to them, have them group up, go through, read the article themselves, code it with some of these codes here, like exclamation point over a word or a phrase means this is important. Checkbox means I knew that. X means this is different from what I thought. And question mark means I don't understand that.
I do love the reading group procedure that you see there in the gray box, how every child has a role. The kids have roles and things that you can discuss, and they work together to figure out things that are confusing. It's important to give them something to do and to discuss. Absolutely. Some scaffolding there. Otherwise, they're just, it's Lord of the Flies.
The Lord of the Flies. Sucks to your ass, Mark.
You have to read the book.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. But the other thing, too, about putting the kids in the groups is you want to balance the types of readers that are in the groups.
Yes.
You want strong readers in the group and you want weak readers in the groups, because as they see the strong readers process the text, as the weak readers see the strong readers process the text, there's skills that are gained there. As you see someone who is better at you doing something, you learn how to do it better.
Admins love differentiated grouping.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just a little bit more information about how, when you're a science teacher, you're actually a reading and writing teacher, just some things to back it up and some more data. My district is a Hattie district. We talk a lot about Hattie, and we see that the effect size when you combine science and literacy instruction is 0.98. So if you don't know Hattie, 0.4, a 0.4 effect size is the target. You want your things that you're doing to have a 0.4 effect size. A 0.98 is more than double that. So
super significant.
Super significant.
All right. So Donald and I are both big readers, but we read entirely different things. I am a fiction girl at heart, and I am always drawn to fiction books in the classroom and with my students. Our students love nonfiction, though, which is where you can really really harness and dig into their love of science. They love nonfiction. If you are like me, though, and you're like most teachers, and you know that the trade book room in your libraries are stocked with fiction trade books that you can check out and use with your classrooms rather than reinvent the wheel, we wanted to show you some books that we know are readily available in most of your school libraries, but have a really strong science connection that you could draw out and use in some of your science instruction. Ezra Jack Keats' The Snowy Day. You could build an insulator. You could talk about changes, changes in matter. Phase changes. That's the word. We read The Long Winter with our daughter together several years ago. I'm a huge Laura Ingalls Wilder fan. And even though he was not so jazzed about reading that book, there's so much science in that book. So many interesting things that you could do with your kids there. Hatchet has been around since I was young. And I mean, it's just well documented, all the science you can dig into with Hatchet. Shivers in the Fridge is a relatively new picture book that's absolutely all about magnets. But little people magnets, they're kind of fun. Out of the Dust is a great one that we generally read in 4th or 5th grade. Most of your school libraries are going to have trade book sets of those. City of Ember, with all of its electricity and currents and circuitry, excellent things you could do there. We did pull in one that is, distinctly nonfiction, Seed, Stems, and Stamens.
Yeah, so that's, an example. People always say, well, give me some examples of science books, and that's one that is a science book, but these others are great engaging titles that the kids will love, but then you can talk about some of the science that goes on in there. So another source for some of these are some of my favorite examples are the Picture Perfect Science and Picture Perfect STEM series. And I've got that link there is hot. It's a book list for those series, the different series, and they have great lessons attached to them. Those books you already probably have in your library.
They probably are in your library or floating around your school. Many districts have purchased them, and most of those professional learning books are given to the librarians to catalog. And sometimes they are sitting in a corner somewhere because a lot of teachers don't know to ask for those professional books. Your librarians probably know where they're located, though.
Yep. And the Eureka series is new. But I love it because it combines science, literature, and history, because you have great inventors. They talk about very diverse groups of inventors and those kind of things. Lots of emphasis on the soft skills in there as well. I don't have a book list for that one yet. I'm working on that one, but I'll share that out when I have it. So we're over time here.
Sorry.
No, I think we're good. If you want to talk more about this, Amanda and I are more than willing to help with this, because this is part of what we're passionate about. And so here's our contact information. Please reach out to us, even if we don't work in your district, but we would love to continue to chat with you about this kind of work. We would also love for you guys to share some of the work that you're doing with us.
Yes. One drawback to doing our presentation in this format and with compressed time is that we can't hear more from you. And we really want to know what kind of great things you're doing already to combine science and literacy in your classrooms, ways you're putting those two together.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording here. And you guys enjoy the rest of the conference. Keep doing what you're doing. You guys are amazing to be surviving in this COVID time. And thanks for teaching kids science.
Yes.
And reading.
And reading with children.
We love it. All right. Let me turn this off.
All right. We're turning off.
Stop recording.
Stop recording.